Hello. Thank you for that warm, gracious introduction. Thank you to the San Francisco Public Library for making this program possible. And thank you to the spirit of Effie Morris, who I just learned a bit about today, for her legacy. And thank you all for showing up. Okay. So yeah, this is one of those special moments that I really have to just take in, because not so long ago, I was new to the city, and I was just beginning my journey as a picture book illustrator. And this is where I would come. The San Francisco Main Public Library is where I would come for inspiration, for reference. And I would stand outside that display case in front of the children's book section and daydream about maybe one day having a book of my own on display on a shelf like that. I don't think I've still been on that shelf yet, but maybe one day. Okay, so yeah, this is the Effie Morris lecture. The word lecture freaks me out. I don't think I'm in a lecture-giving place in my life just yet. So this is a talk. This is a discussion. And my favorite part of doing things like this is the conversation part, where you guys get to ask me questions if you have any. So yeah, I'll just kind of begin. The title of this talk is You Are Here, Finding Yourself in Picture Books. And it's pretty much my story. It's my journey in picture books. It's my education, my inspirations, my process, and also some thoughts on maybe the current state of the picture book today. All right, okay, so let's begin, shall we? Where to start? Let's start here. I know. So that's me and my mother. Okay, so this is one of very few photos that I have of me and my mother. That is because I was raised by my grandmother. My mother, she struggled with drug addiction and being in and out of prison my whole childhood. But I was fortunate enough to have a very strong, supportive, loving, warm grandmother who was a foundation for me, for my brother, for my two cousins, for my aunt. And we all lived in a one-bedroom apartment in LA. And so I say we had limited space, we had limited means, but I like to think we had an abundance of love. And also, looking back, I realized today that, well, drawing is something I've done my whole life. And drawing for me is a way of creating space for myself. I couldn't control the circumstances around me as a child, but I could at least control the world I wanted to see on a piece of paper with a pencil or whatever I had. So my education, I grew up in LA, and I drew my whole life, as I said, and I drew in in high school, and I went to an art college, the California Institute of the Arts, and it's in Valencia, California. It's about 45 minutes outside of LA. And it was founded by this guy. And it was a really great place to learn, to explore creativity. It is a multidisciplinary school. You can learn filmmaking, dance, music, fine art, and animation. And animation is what I studied. Now, animation is, it's a medium that I have the highest respect for. It's not one I was very good at, but it's one that, to animate means to bring to life. And I love this idea that I think I took from my education in animation, that a picture is something that can have life, that you can bring to life, and that deserves a certain amount of integrity and respect. Yeah. And so even though I was in our animation school and going through the process of animating, what I found myself being drawn towards was the art behind animation. So these are the people who I was admiring. These are the concept artists, the visual development artists of Disney. And I was mostly interested in the artists of the earlier Disney Golden Age. Walt Paraguay, who art directed films like 101 Dalmatians, Mary Blair, she's one of the most famous women in animation, and she's art directed films from Snow White, not Snow White. Thank you, you can yell them out. Cinderella, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland. Okay, here we go, now we're on track. And I also love the work of Ivan Earl. And what I love about this work is it's so emotional. In animation, it's very different from picture books in that, or an illustration, in that an illustration, you have time to sit with it and you can really take it in. But an animation is very quick moving. The frames move by fast. And so they're trying to get as much story out as possible and try to make sure that you're taking it in, the art directors. So there's always so much emotion happening. And in that Cinderella scene, you can tell this is a quiet, soft, lovely, romantic moment. And in this Ivan Earl piece, you can see that this is threatening. So it's bright green, and it's angular, and it's diagonals. Also, when I was in animation school, I found myself being drawn to the work that was more experimental, that wasn't necessarily something that you would find in a big studio or seen in movie theaters across the country. So this is the work of an experimental animator by the name of Caroline Leaf, and she's from Canada. And this is a piece called The Street. And she was a sand animator artist. She basically would somehow, I don't know what she did. She would take this platform, she would put sand on it, and she would move the pieces of sand around bit by bit, take a photo, move it again, take a photo, and she made this incredible animations. I'll show you a clip.
It was on a Friday afternoon that I came home to find a crowd gathered in front of our house.
It's a short clip, but yeah, it's incredible. And I also found myself drawn to work that was foreign. This is an animator from Russia by the name of Yuri Norstein. And he worked with paper cutout animation, so stop motion animation. And his process was similar. He had a camera over the work, and he would slowly move pieces of, why am I having trouble with the English language? And he would slowly move things and animate them. Anyway, you can't really describe his work because his work is magic. You'll see what I'm talking about. Magic, right? No computers, crazy. So even though I was in animation school for 4 years, I found myself going to the school library and looking in the children's book section. They had a very small children's book section, but I found myself looking to these illustrators for inspiration for my animation. Of course, Ezra Jack Keats, most famously written and illustrated The Snowy Day, one of my biggest inspirations. I love his use of collage and the patterns that you see in his work. I love the work of Roger Duvoisin for the simplicity, for the minimal colors and sort of just the way he plays around with shapes and design. And Leo Leone, I love his work because it's very imaginative and creative. He uses found objects, like that sea kelp that you see is made from like a print that he made using like a doily. So this guy said, no, Albert Einstein said, the secret to creativity is knowing how to hide your sources. So I just gave away a bunch of my sources right now. That's because I don't agree with Einstein. No, I do agree with Einstein. I agree with what he's getting at in this quote, which is that creativity, to be creative, you're being inspired. You're taking in the world around you. I don't necessarily believe that you have to hide them because, there are infinite sources in the universe for inspiration, hence the galaxies. Okay, so after college, I applied. Wait, where's this going? Okay, no. So in college, a part of what I did in school was to put a portfolio together so I could hopefully have a job one day. And this is the cover of what that portfolio was. And I wasn't really sure where I fit in yet. Because like I said, I wasn't really that strong of an animator. I did like the visual development work. And so in my portfolio, I just put together a bunch of illustrations that were just sort of reflective of my world, of things I had seen in my life. So I created this series of characters out of collage called The Down and Out. And it was just sort of like people I had seen in my environment, the transgender homeless person, the pigeon lady, the alcoholic, or, a vet. Yeah. It was also important for me to showcase gay roosters, all sorts of things. Things that were just close to my heart. And also in college, it was an animation school, I created a short animation for my senior year. It was called Dinosaur Song. And you'll probably see a lot of the influences from all the animation that I just shared. But I'll show, and in that portfolio I showed how I went about animating that film, from the process of sketches to final animation. And it's a pretty much a short story about a boy who finds a bone in his backyard and builds it one day. Okay, there we go.
Once there was a dinosaur, great, big, and slow. Dinosaur song. So big, so slow, it had flowers sprouting on its back and moss growing in its eyelashes. Ancient old huge dinosaur, with songs humming soft inside his spine and dragonflies rattling in his rib cage. So slow, and more slow every day, until his movements were almost imperceptible, until, like an old-fashioned wind-up watch, he wound down and sunk slowly into the soil. Beetles came and wove him a blanket of twigs and soft things.
Okay, so after animation school, I put this portfolio together and I applied to an internship at Pixar here in the Bay Area. And I got into the visual development department. No, sorry, into the consumer products department. And at that time, the film that was under production was up. And so I had this incredible mentor there. His name was Ben Butcher. And he basically was the guy in charge of creating all the toys and all the apparel and all the merchandise for the films. And he also went to Cal Arts. And he had the biggest love I have ever seen of anyone for the picture book medium. He really respected it. And he had just the most incredible library I'd ever seen. And I'd say he was the one who planted the seed in me that, oh, maybe you should pursue book illustration. And sort of, I mean, he completely like changed my life. And so while I was there, he basically gave me the task of just taking the artwork from the people who were producing the film and just sort of be inspired by it and to interpret it in my own style, in my own way. And so I was pretty much just illustrating. And you can see the influences. There's a doily in there, and I totally stole that from Leo Leone. It's in the wing. And yeah. And so while I was there was one day when Ben said to me, so tomorrow we're having a big meeting where some executives on the film and the director are just going to go over how things are going in our department. You should come. You should also bring some of the stuff you've been doing and just pin it up and just come. And of course I was like, oh yeah, okay, sure, yeah, why not? And of course I stayed up all night pinning the most perfect board I could imagine. And of course I was late to the meeting. And of course it was the most windy day ever. And as I was transporting all this work, things were flying and there's a tornado. I don't know. But I get there, I'm a hot, sweaty mess, and I put the art off in some dark corner. And after the meeting kind of concludes, one of the directors or producers looks over at my board and goes, oh, who did this work? And then Ben goes, oh, it's one of the new intern. And then the director goes, oh, he should do a book for us. And that's how I got my first book deal. Thank you. So just more work from that. And this mentor was incredible because typically books that are illustrated for a big company like this, for a big studio like this, just typically will say Disney Publishing or Disney Pixar Publishing. But he really made sure that my name was out there and that, I really had this idea of ownership and believed in myself and really just encouraged me. Okay, so you would think after Pixar and maybe my first book deal, things would just work out. But no, it didn't. I had to go through an exploring period in which I was a babysitter, in which I worked for this tech company. It's the Bay Area. I was doing web merchandising. I'm still not really sure what that is. And I also taught after-school art with kids. I did things though that I love, things that still inspired me and still kept me creative. I collaborated with friends. I had a friend who was a musician, and he asked me if I would do a music video for him. So things like this, projects like this. And this is sort of my desk where I'm putting together this video. It's titled Man on the Moon. Here's a quick clip of that video. Thank you. And something else, a habit that I had picked up from college also was making sure that I was sharing my work. This is what I always tell people who want to break into picture book illustration, to make sure that you're creating stuff, but also make sure that you're creating a space where people can actually see what you're making. So this is an old blog that I used to keep called Moss Covered Blog. I thought it was cool at the time. And basically anything I was working on, I would share. So these are just little projects that I would make for myself, little things I would just make up for me to do. That was my great-grandmother. I made a timeline of her life. That was one of the projects that I worked on with kids. It was Halloween. And this piece is an illustration that I did of me and my grandmother riding a bus together. And so this is the genesis of a book, Last Stop on Market Street. And so what happened? I one day get an email from a guy, his name is Stephen Malk, who ends up being one of the best agents in children's books. He reached out to me and he said, if you don't have an agent, consider this fan mail. He said, I came across your blog and I think you have a voice for picture books and I'd love to work together. And I said, yes, please. And he saw this piece and he thought that one of the clients that he represents, Matt De La Pena, would be the perfect partner for writing a story around this illustration. And so Matt De La Pena looked at this illustration and he began to imagine this story. And we spoke a few times over the phone about what it's like growing up riding the bus with your grandmother. And so, yeah, in Last Stop on Market Street. And this is a little bit about my process. So for me, it starts off here. This is what I get, a manuscript, basically a bunch of words on a piece of paper. And you can actually, this is a very early manuscript. The boy's name is DJ in this. In the book, it ends up being CJ. And so, yeah, this is the place where I just use my imagination. I just figure out this world. I figure out what the characters will look like. I figure out what the setting will look like. And for this book, it was very different. Typically, it involves a lot of research and reference, like, for instance, a book like Josephine, or even Leo. Like, I take in all sorts of things that inspire me. But for this book, I really relied on sort of my own experiences and yeah. And so illustrating an entire book can be really overwhelming and intimidating. So I like to start small. These are Post-it notes. I wish I could show you right now how small they are. They're like this big. And so basically I start small because, it makes it more digestible. Yeah, I'm not really worrying about design. I'm not really worrying about color at this point. I'm just thinking about where the characters and setting will go, where text will go. That's another part of picture book illustrating is paginating, figuring out where the word should go. And I make lots of mistakes, you guys. This is my desk, just when I'm going through those storyboards and some aren't working, I just toss them aside and try again. And this is actually storyboards for a book, Leo, A Ghost Story. And you can see reference up at the top. I was looking at houses. I'm sure I got that book at this very library. Yeah. And then I get to figure out what the characters look like. And I'm just kind of like going off of intuition, just kind of having fun with it. I think this is a sweater that I would want if it existed. And setting. Everyone asks, where is Market Street supposed to be set? Everyone thinks it's their city. But I like to think it's a mixture of where I live now, San Francisco, and where I was born and grew up, LA. And you can kind of see a peek into the materials I'm using. I mostly work with acrylic paint. I also use a lot of collage, and you can kind of see a piece of construction paper up in the corner that I kind of just put paint over, and then I cut out with an X-Acto blade and then glued down. And again, lots of mistakes. You see that umbrella all the way at the top that didn't work out that first time for some reason? Also, I'm experimenting, those leaves on there are made out of a little stamp that I made, just trying to find ways to keep it fun and entertaining and fun for myself. And with this book, again, it was also very important for me to make sure that I was really, showing how a city feels and looks. I want to capture that grit and that dirt. Not all books, need to have tree-lined streets. And also the best thing about being an illustrator is you can always sneak in things. Like Basil is actually my nephew's name. And the bus that is in the book is his birthday, the bus number. And my studio is actually here in the city, in the Mission, where I live. Basically when I'm done with a piece, I just pin it to a board and kind of take in how it's all coming together. And the process can take me anywhere from 3 to 4 months to illustrate a book. So this year's been incredible, and I love being able to share this book and my work with everyone, with anyone. But of course, this experience is the most gratifying part of this experience, is being able to share this with my grandmother. So my title, You Are Here, Finding Yourself in Picture Books, has 2 meanings. It's about, of course, my journey and how I found myself here. But also it speaks to a larger conversation that's happening right now in children's books, which is how do we address the lack of how can we make books more inclusive? And I don't really know what more I have to add to the conversation that would be that thought-provoking. All I know is that picture books especially are an introduction to the world for many children. It's in a picture book that we first learn that a pig goes oink and a cow goes moo. And it's when we first start to see characters that look like us, if we're so lucky. And it's important that we see characters look like us, because if we don't, I think we're being sent a message that maybe our story doesn't matter as much, maybe our life doesn't matter as much. So of course, it's important for me to make sure that I'm telling stories visually that more accurately reflect the world that we live in. And it's beyond color and hair texture, it's gender identity, it's size, it's disabilities, it's everything. And there's a lot of, and it's obviously messy what's happening, right? There's so many instances where people are being called out and where we're not really sure how to have the conversation. Okay, so real quick story. So this book, Leo, A Ghost Story, this is I'm really happy that I got to work on this book. And I remember being at an event where I was sharing the book with people, and I remember a lady came up to me. She probably I don't know who she was, but she said to me basically, I'm tired of stories with white characters on the front. Why did you make Leo white? Now, right? I'm just letting that sink in. Because, Leo is a ghost. And ghosts tend to be white or translucent. But also, if you open the book, Leo's bestie is Jane, who is a blue American and who rocks braids. She also lives in a neighborhood where a robber comes. It's the hood, okay? I feel like I get what she's getting at, but I look at creating books that are inclusive as an opportunity, as a joy, not as like a burden. And I feel like we have to be careful, who we put that responsibility on. And, is that a question you're asking every author or illustrator? Anyhow, on that note, thank you.
Kristen, are you hopefully to have some time to
Yeah.
let people have questions for you?
I would love to open it to questions. If anyone has any questions about the process, about books, yeah,
Thank you so much.
sure.
Okay. Pass this down.
This is weird. I have a quick question.
Hello.
Have you thought about being an author and telling a story with the words and pictures?
So here's the thing. Of course, I aspire to write and illustrate a book. I feel like I'm in a place right now where I feel more confident in my voice as a visual storyteller, and I'm still finding my voice as a writer. And I kind of feel like there's a lot of books out there, so I don't want to just say anything. I want to make sure that whatever I write, it means something, and I want to give myself that time to put it together, Yeah, so yes, I do. Yeah. Okay, here comes the mic. Okay.
My question is could your style of books influence us to write a book with the same style of illustration?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah. So, as I said, I come to the library to be inspired and to find things that make me want to draw and to keep me creative. So I can only hope that anything I make might also have the same effect on someone else. I don't know. Also, it's very important for me to have fun when I'm drawing and making pictures, because I hope that same spirit will go into the drawing, and I hope you have fun looking at them. Yeah, so thank you.
You had mentioned some of the artists who inspired you when you were going through your creative process as an adult making a picture book. What were some of the stories that inspired you or spoke to you when you were a child?
Okay. So, yeah, one of my all-time favorite picture books is Are You My Mother by P.D. Eastman. I just love this poor little bird trying to figure out who his mom was. Was it the bulldozer? Was it the dog? It just connected with me. Yeah, but honestly, growing up, I struggled with writing and reading, and I really wasn't attached to books that didn't have pictures in them. So my transition into reading was through comics and graphic novels. Yeah.
How did it feel like working with the different authors that you've been working with for all these books?
It's another great question. It felt great. Some of them are really close friends, actually. Like the guy who wrote Leo a Ghost Story, Mac Barnett, he lives here in the Bay. And we used to be on the same trivia team. And it just feels great. What I love most about my work is I almost feel like I'm an actor. Like I get to take on different roles and like read different scripts and then have a different performance every new book. So I love working with new voices and new people.
My question is, here. My question is, you show your studio. Are you renting a studio or are you working from home? Like, do you feel lonely? As an illustrator, that's why I ask. I do feel lonely in my studio.
Well, to answer your question, I do feel lonely from time to time. But I used to work out of my room, and actually my roommates are here. Shout out, hey. But now I have my own studio space, which is still shared. It's in the Mission, yeah, there's screen printers and jewelry makers, and I find that to be the best environment for me, at least one where I can at least have someone to talk to or to get some a second opinion with, and it's tough, especially in a city like San Francisco. You really have to find a way to to live within your means. Yeah, as you may know. Yeah.
Good evening.
Hey.
Can you talk about some of your new projects?
Oh, okay. Let's see. So what I just sent off and hopefully won't have to revise anymore was a follow-up book to Gaston, a sequel to Gaston. Yay, we got some fans. And the book that's next to come out for me is a book called School's First Day of School. And it was written by Adam Rex, who was an incredible picture book author and illustrator. And it's one of those books that you can't believe has never been written before. It's literally about a school that just got built, and he's really nervous about his first day of being a school. And then after that, there's a book written by Cynthia Rylant, the great Cynthia Rylant. It's called Little Penguins.
Hi.
Hello.
I was wondering about your use of the term picture books, and I also see that you say pictures by as opposed to illustrated by, if that's just a term you like, or is there some political meaning behind that?
I think I just saw it somewhere, and I'm like, I'm gonna take that. It goes back to that Einstein thing, yeah.
I'm wondering what you might have drawn obsessively as a young child in your early days.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So, I've always been obsessed with dinosaurs, and that, like most kids, and that's why I made that film in college. I think I needed a place to express my love of dinosaurs. So I've always drew dinosaurs. I always drew, of course, myself with superpowers, laser eyes, flying. Yeah.
Am I on? Hi. I sorry I don't have a question. I just kind of want to gush. And thank you for the K through 8th grade assembly that you gave at my school a couple years ago and riveted that entire age span of an audience. And really appreciate the book that you created with Matt de la Pena, Last Stop on Market Street, also transcends age, the story. Being able, as a school librarian, being able to read it to so many grade levels, and it impacts this huge span of an audience. Not that you're ever too old for a picture book, but thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
I enjoyed seeing everything that was inspiring you. I know that wasn't everything, but I was really taken by the Disney movies and wondered if you have a favorite Disney movie and why.
Okay, my favorite Disney movie. It's hard, right? Okay, top 3. Lion King, Little Mermaid, and Aladdin. Yes. Favorite Pixar movie, Finding Nemo. Okay, here we go. Yes.
Hi. We actually had just gone to the library, and my son, who's 7, was looking for a book on filmmaking for kids. And, you know, we found some really technical stuff for young adults. Do you have any suggestions, or should we just kind of wing it?
So that's you should totally wing it. All those animations that, or at least the later ones that you saw that I made, were made on my iPhone. Like, there are so many apps out there where you can download for free and just sort of make your own little stop motion animation. Just grab some construction paper and some shapes and just move things around. And it's just a lot of fun. Yeah, I'd say just wing it, go for it.
Hi, I do apologize that I came in late, but I had 2 quick questions. And one is, piggybacking on my friend, what suggestions do you have for young authors that love making stories and want to have them shared, but they're too young to put it on the internet? What can they do? Or are there sites for kids? Should we look that up on the library or an app also?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't actually know the answer to that. What I will say is, I mean, the sharing part became important later on because that's when, you know, it's time to maybe make a career out of it, maybe to find like people who are interested in your work. But I think as a kid, it should totally just be a time of just, you know, having fun and exploring and creating and not necessarily worrying about putting it out there, because putting it out there also brings judgment and criticism. So I feel like, you know, it takes like time and to figure out who your voice and before you start sharing it. I don't know. Is that an answer? I don't know.
Second quick question is, if you could pick an author, past or present, to illustrate their book, who would you pick and why?
I mean, I've got to work with a lot of incredible authors. I don't know. I think past or present, right? I mean, I love the work of Roald Dahl. I mean, I know Quentin Blake has like signatured his books, but how incredible would it be to work on like, you know, a young adult like story like that? Roald Dahl.
Hi there. I just was curious as to which comic books really inspired you as a as a kid, and if you had a choice, what would be your superpower?
Great question. I was always into Catwoman and anything Batman. Okay, right? And the other part of that question was, and what was the other part of that question? Superpowers. I would like to, I think I want like, this is hard. No, I've thought about this many times. I would like to be able to have those Jean Grey powers, right? I mean, she could kind of do it all, levitate, move things with her mind, but also she kind of lost control sometimes. This is hard. Thank you.
So we have time for 2 more questions.
Right here.
Thank you. The Josephine Baker project seems so cool, so I wondered how that came to you and if you did a lot of research, including when she came back to America and adopted her rainbow tribe.
Yeah. So the way that came to me is I think it's a miracle how that came to me, because prior to that book, I mean, Josephine Baker had always been a huge inspiration for me, to me. I mean, she just represents possibilities. She represents, it doesn't matter where you come from. Where you come from doesn't have to determine where you'll end up. And during the research of that book, I mean, it was very important for me to see Paris as Josephine did. And I really, I mean, that was one of the most, like, I don't know, one of my most, I don't know what the word is. It was just one of the greatest experiences I had working on a book, and learning more about her. Yeah.
Is there any chance that any of your books will be made into an animated, perhaps Pixar movie? And if so, would you want to do the animation on it?
And what was the last part?
If so, would you want to do the animation for it or be on the team?
So even if one was, I don't know if I could even talk about it. But is that a good answer? But I mean, that would be a dream. I know that they're making a Last Stop play. That's in the works right now. Wouldn't that be cool on the stage? So yeah, and of course I'd want to be involved. That would be my dream, like art direction. That's like, yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you.